Well, I got this car back. It's leaking transmission fluid again. But I was thinking maybe that new transmission dipstick, it didn't fit in the hole really great. But I was figuring maybe that popped out. Or I was figuring where I use that shallow socket on them AN fittings that go in the transmission, that it might have been leaking from there. But no, guess what? It's not leaking from anything I done. And I actually did notice it when I was working on it before, but they had tightened the gasket up way too tight. It looks like they just used a silicone, RTV sealant, but either way, they got it way too tight and squished it out. So it's leaking from the pan now. But here's a video of where the leak's at and showing that my part, what I did, is not leaking. Remember I told you that pan gasket wasn't on there very good? It's leaking out the pan. They got this pan gasket way too tight. Look at this, some of it's peeling off. Look, see? And that's where it's leaking. So man, they not only did they mess the lines up, it was leaking from the lines, it's leaking from the pan too. So I'm glad it was nothing I worked on. But I'm going to have to buy another gasket and drop that pan. Put another gasket on it. Alright, so I took all the bolts out. Except for that one there. And the one directly across from it, which holds the transmission shifter linkage. I loosened that one up a little bit. Now I'm going to loosen this one up. And I'm going to let a lot of that fluid come out of there. Because when that pan's full of fluid, and you're by yourself, even with somebody holding one side and you holding the other, it's hard to take that pan down without getting fluid everywhere, all over you and everything. So I loosened the other one up. It's starting to leak. I got this big oil catch can thingamajiggy from Walmart. This should covers the whole bottom of the pan. It's actually kind of shaped like the transmission pan. It's kind of cool. But anyway, I'm going to start loosening this bolt up. I'm going to let the fluid drain out the most I can. Then I'm going to take both them bolts out and try to hold the pan and take it out of there without spilling as much as, without trying to spill as much as I can there. But like I said, it's hard to do this by yourself without splashing transmission fluid everywhere. But we're going to give it a try. Alright, I got the pan out. Alright, cleaned it up real good. Actually, if your transmission's old and you've had it in a while, you'll find a lot of trash in the pan. Just the frictions, the bands, they get rubbed on and the stuff gets in the pan. But this pan, he drove it over here low on fluid about 30-40 minutes, and really there wasn't hardly anything in the pan, so that's good. But it was leaking in this area over here. So now usually what happens, and he did have the gasket on it, and he had silicone with the gasket. But what usually happens is these bolts, they get tightened up too tight, and then it pushes these up. So what I usually do is I put a straight edge on here. I don't know if you can tell that, but see, that one's pushed up. So the ones that are, you can use a straight edge and go all the way around and check each one of them. See, like that side. That one's pushed up a little. And you can just go around. See, that's pretty straight right there. See, that side's really straight. There's no wobble at all. This side right here, it's real straight. So, this one right here. And that one right there especially. And that's where it was leaking. It was leaking right there. So, I'm going to just take a little ball peen hammer and just... Where's my ball peen hammer? I think it's up here. There we go. I got so much crap laying around. But all that stuff is for that. And we're going to do that next because the head gaskets came in. But, and all that stuff. So, once I get this one done, we're going to pull it out. And then we've got some race lifters for the 1980. It's got to cut out at high RPM, 65, 6800. It likes to cut out, so... We bought some $550 race lifters to put in that thing. It had cheap $150 lifters on it. But I'm just going to sit here and tap this down until it's straight with my straight edge here. Now I'm going to do the same thing over here. That one ain't so bad, but yeah, just, I don't go crazy on this. Just tap it down a little. Try to hit it as flat as you can. Check it. See, it's getting there. And do it again until you get it straight. And taking this pan out, it ain't no problem. I mean, you got, I don't know, however many bolts there. You just take the bolts out and it comes right out. I usually take them all out. You got to be careful though, because like I took all of them out except for this one and this one. And then I loosened that one, fluid started to come out, and then I took this one out. I pulled down a little bit. But you got to be careful when you do that because you'll warp these ledges. So it's a lot better if you have one person on one side and one person on the other. Drop it down a little bit, let the fluid drain out, and then if you got like one of them big oil catchers like I got, and then you can just bring it down and drop it right on top of that, and then just flip it over and drain it out into the oil catcher can thing. But yeah, I'm gonna get all this straightened out. And then what I like to do is I like to put a bead not on top of the rail, but on each side of the rail. I'll put a bead, just a small bead, and I'll put the gasket on it, and I'll let that dry so it sets up. And really the only reason I do that is to make sure that my bolt holes line up on the gaskets. So when you put them gaskets on there, man, when you try to put the pan up in there, they'll move around on you. And it's a pain in the butt to get it all lined back up while you're trying to put it in there. So I'll just do that to line the pan up. And then before you put it in, make sure you clean where this is going to mount to the transmission real good too. Usually that side doesn't get real dirty, but you just wipe it down. I'm probably going to use some brake clean on a rag and wipe it. Well, I'm going to dry it off first. Then I'm going to use some brake clean on a rag and then wipe it off again. But we'll get to that in a minute. Alright, after I get the silicone on there, I put the gasket on, lining the holes up, and then I push the gasket down nice and even. All the way around, I'll let it set up a little bit. But you lay your straight edge on your gasket, should be nice and straight. It's bubbled a little bit there. I might put a little bit of silicone on top too. That side's nice and straight. A little bit of air here and there, but when we tighten it down, that should straighten that out. So there's a little bit of air there. Let's take this light off. Maybe you can see better, yeah. So there's a little little bit of air there. A little bit of air, light. Let's see. This pan ain't perfectly straight. I tried to do the best I could with it, but I think I am going to put a bead of silicone across the top too, since it's a little crooked. But when we tighten that up, it'll pull these in a little where the holes were. So yeah, I'm gonna let that set up a little bit, and then I'll go under the car and dry up underneath where the gasket's gonna contact the transmission. I'm gonna clean that up real good. I'm gonna dry it off. Then I'm gonna use some brake clean on a rag and wipe it off. And then I'll stick it back up in there. All right, we'll put some fluid in it. I put about 4 quarts in it. Let's see what that does. I don't remember how much the pan holds. So let's get under here and see if it's leaking any. Yeah, it's leaking. It's leaking out right there. Man, this transmission was leaking from everywhere. It was leaking from the lines. It was leaking from the dipstick tube. And now it's leaking from the case connector. Alright, so the reason that case connector is leaking is because it's pushed down inside there. It ain't all the way up. Now hopefully I can wedge a screwdriver in there or something, or get some pliers on it and pull it straight up. Hopefully. But it ain't all the way up. There's supposed to be a tab right there. There's supposed to be tabs around the outer edge that hold that thing. I can't hardly get my camera up in there. Ain't enough room. But I'm gonna pull that up, and that should fix it. Hopefully I can just put a screwdriver in there and it'll come straight up. Yeah, that's way down in there. And it's leaking good. Well, I tried my best to get that case connector to go up in there without having to take the pan off. That didn't work. So I had to take the pan off and push it up in there. And now they've either broke the tabs. I can't focus. Ants keep crawling on me. Get off that man. Because I got it all the way up in there. But when I was pushing that connector back on there, it popped back out. This camera does not like to focus up close. And it looks like all the tabs are where they're supposed to be. I can't hardly see, man. I'm trying to use the camera and see at the same time. But yeah, look. Let me push on that again and see if I got it a little bit higher that time. push on it again, see if it pops back out. Yeah, see? I pushed on it and it popped right back out. That's why it was leaking. There's a rubber seal on that up in there. And if it don't get all the way up in there, it's going to leak. Alright, I'm just seeing if I can get a better view of these tabs. My camera don't like to focus up this close. Well, I can push that back down in there, but it ain't easy. I'm hoping it stays like that. If not, I've got a 96, 97 transmission sitting in the garage. If it pops back out, I guess I'll have to take the pan and everything back off again. And have to take all this part out of the bottom. There's a solenoid and a accumulator, or whatever you call that stuff. It's got to come out and make room for the bottom of that to come out. But I've had one like that before, and it stayed up in there. So I mean, it ain't easy to push back down, but I can push it back down. But and I reuse that pan gasket. Hopefully that's okay. But let's lower it down and put some fluid in it and see what happens. Anyway, for comparison, that's what it's supposed to look like. See these tabs? Actually, that one's broke. The rest of them are there. See? That's what it's supposed to look like.
So there's supposed to be 8 tabs that go around this thing. And you can see here, that one's broken. Then this one here's completely gone. And there's more in the back that I couldn't see, so.
Alright, I'm gonna get it up to temp and see if it's leaking. Top it off, see it's leaking. So let's check again real quick. Is the transmission leaking? Part 3. No! There is some fluid up there, but the only reason that's up there is because I poured like 5 quarts in it, like really fast. And that thing you put the fluid in it, it's not sealed tight, so it leaks a little bit. I'd put a rag around there so it wouldn't leak that bad, but still leak. I probably should have poured it in there fast. Oh well. We'll let it warm up and check it and see what the fluid level is and go from there.
So this transmission was definitely leaking from here. And in hindsight, it might not have been leaking from here on the pan. It could have just been all the fluid coming down from the case connector you see at the top there. But either way, I don't like the way that they had this. So, and I had to take the pan off to get up there anyway. And they had a real thin gasket with a bunch of silicone. The gasket I got, it was really thick, so that worked out better anyway. And then this isn't right. They didn't have this in there right. That seal is supposed to be all the way down in the hole. That ledge should be touching the ledge of the transmission. And then the dipstick tube goes down in there. So they didn't have this right either. And then the case connector here was definitely leaking. Here's another view of the case connector, all not pushed all the way up in there. And see, this is why I do a lot of my work, because my own work. And, you know, I make a lot of mistakes. and but I always fix it. But the thing about it is, you take these cars to shops these days. He had this done at a shop. He had his converter installed at a shop, and that's the way it came back to him. He even took it back, and they told him, I think they told him that the transmission case was cracked or something. But anyway, this is why I do my own work. I just do research and fix stuff because, I know I'll eventually get it right. I do make a lot of mistakes. I ain't gonna lie, and I'm not the greatest at this stuff. You learn as you go and figure it out. But I mean, this is unacceptable for a shop to do this type of work when you pay good money for it.
Alright, so I drove it around, got on it a little bit, and I parked it over here on the blacktop, or concrete, whatever this is. I think it's blacktop, but anyway, that was from the last time I parked it over here and it was still leaking. After I changed the pan gasket, it was leaking from the case connector. This thing was leaking from everywhere. It was, the dipstick tube wasn't in right. One of the lines wasn't flared right. I fixed that. I gave it back to him because I thought it was fixed, and it was leaking from the pan and the case connector. The case connector, as you saw in the video there, had some tabs broke off of it, and I guess the transmission never leaked before. And he had a stall converter put in it, and I'm assuming when they went to push the connector, the wire harness connector on it, they pushed the connector all the way down in the transmission because it had some tabs broke off. Now I pushed it back up in there, and it's pretty tight up in there. I think it'll stay. If it don't, I told him to bring it back to me, and I'll take my other transmission apart and take the connector out of it and put it in this one. But you have to take a little bit of the bottom of the transmission apart, so I think it'll stay like that. Like I said, I had a transmission before. It had almost every single tab broke off of it, and once I pushed it up in there, it stayed. You got to be careful pulling the connector off or on. But yeah, it's completely dry under here. That's old stain from the last time. And the transmission was full. And everything looked good there. But yeah, there's no new wet spots. So hopefully all is well. But I'll give it back to him and see what happens.